closer. Yeah. Uh-oh. Okay, cut. No.
All right, we're back. I'm back. I got carried. Tina carries me away to places.
She really does.
Yeah, she carries me away.
Beautiful.
All right, it is February, people. It is the month of love, and the love doctors are in session. Okay? I hope you're taking notes because we've got some valuable things for you. We thought the month of love, we could talk about all sorts of things. We could talk about dating and relationships. We could talk about, what do you call them now, ETADs? Yeah, when I was here, we called those screw your roommates. Okay, that's politically incorrect now and some sort of an aggression, so you can't call it that. But we could talk about a lot of things. We could talk about all sorts of things. It's the month of love.
A month of love. We thought we could show our whole wedding video from 1989.
Let's do it.
We do that.
Let's do it. It's
There's a
quality
picture of us right up here.
VHS. It was filmed by somebody.
Scott,
yeah, there it is.
We're not showing your video. Okay, no.
Yeah,
I didn't know
it's
you
a good
put this
20
up there.
pounds ago.
No, actually.
For me.
No, we're not going to show you our whole video.
All right, we're not going to talk about. We did think this, and this is why Schloss is here today. Is we thought let's do a sex seminar. Yeah, we could do that, and we could just watch our son squirm the whole time. Yeah, we could do that.
Really awkward.
We thought that'd be good.
Awkward. Yeah.
Felt a little bit obvious, and so we did put our heads together. We prayed about it, and we sought the Lord, and we thought, well, clearly, let's talk about finances.
Communication. Oh.
We're going to talk about conflict. We're going to talk about conflict, people, because conflict is real. It's real, okay? We're not just going to talk about marriage. We're going to talk about life
80s.
Conflict. It happens.
Conflict.
It happens. It's part of love.
It's part of love.
Here's love. Here's conflict. Together. Swimming.
We want to share, these are some great 80s. We can pull that off. It might be distracting. It's a little distracting. We want to share our journey with conflict ourselves. Thought a lot about it and thought, what can we offer? And our stories. You know, everybody has a story of coming into conflict. Our story is kind of growing up. Mine was in a home family together, but kind of one parent who was in conflict, pretty loud and outspoken, and one parent who was very pulled back, very passive-aggressive, or passive, not passive, just very passive. And so this model, I had one sibling who had a lot of struggle with my parents, was out there, and a lot of conflict, a lot of fighting, and whenever that happened, I kind of disappeared. It just made me anxious and stressed. Some of you can relate with when that's kind of firing, pulled back. Scott had kind of whoever was loudest wins, kind of just it got louder, whoever. He had a sibling that struggled quite a bit growing up, and kind of the family kind of circled around that conflict, and it was just kind of like bombs kind of dropped and then scatter. Both of us were probably like fleers from conflict. And so a lot of anxiousness, a lot of avoidance. And then coming into kind of our young adult years, coming into college, right? You arrive in a place like this, and everybody's got those stories that they're all bringing in of their own experiences. Positive, often they're not that positive, they're not that formed yet, we're just kind of surviving through it. So you arrive on in your dorm and you got conflict, it's kind of in your face, you can't really retreat and go back home and go to your room, you're kind of in it all the time. I don't know if you've experienced that, but when I arrived, not much appreciation for it, not much understanding of it, not much interest in it. So I remember the early seasons of conflict at college. How can I get out of this as fast as I can? Or if it was happening, it must mean something's wrong. There must be something going on wrong. I had two roommates one semester with all of our coming and going on programs, and I landed with two friends that I loved. And we were in a triple in Armington, and when they would have conflict, they started yelling at each other. And it kept going, and it escalated. And I just remember I had like 5 or 6 times that semester where I just left and got away from it. I'm like, what the heck? I don't even know what to do with that. Those were stories. That was a journey, but there was no hiding. Uncomfortable, flee. It feels like something's wrong. It feels like it must be time to depart that friendship. There must not be a lot of future there because I don't even know how to kind of relate and connect or do that kind of conversation. So we're not only talking today about the obvious, like the fighting or the arguments, the more overt things. Conflict can also feel kind of bumpy or mild. It can be kind of getting a question with a little bit of tone, or it can, somebody starts to kind of question and you feel something like, what? don't think they like me, or they just kind of did that in front of people. That was hard. It could mean habits or annoyances. You're living in such close proximity, people can start to bug you. And all of a sudden, like, now I got conflict because I don't really want to be around them because whatever they're doing is bugging me. All sorts of levels of conflict, not always superheated. But one thing that we know is that we, looking back and what we want to talk about today, we really way underestimated the role of conflict and how much a part of life conflict was, but its role in our lives, not just something to be avoided. And not with people out there, but actually kind of right here. The role of conflict and in our significant relationships, our co-working relationships, people that we spend a lot of time around, way underestimated its presence and then its role in our lives.
Mm-hmm. So to Jamie's point, I'm thinking when we were back in college, we had this mindset that it must be bad, that hard in conflict must be bad. And I think it's sort of like being an athlete, like a good hard workout. It's hard, it's not bad. It's just hard. I've made my boys say that all the time. Hard is not bad, it's just hard. And conflict, what if conflict was actually one of the tools that the Lord uses in a community to bring about something beautiful? He's very familiar with conflict. Like if you just play some of the gospel accounts back in your mind. Remember John 2, he and his mom and some friends are at a wedding and they run out of wine and his mom comes to him and says, hey, they ran out of wine. And a little conflict moment, Jesus says, woman, what does that have to do with me? And she doesn't listen to him. She just turns to the servants and says, do whatever he tells you to do. Okay, just do whatever he says to do. And I think she gave him that look that moms have. It's like a superpower. And then he made water into wine after that. Okay, so like there's a little conflict moment, little family moment. He has it with his brothers. They're ridiculing him. Can you imagine being a brother of Jesus? Talk about sibling rivalry. It's like, oh, my brother's the Messiah, And only to find out later that, man, he was God incarnate. You start playing the tapes back like, I guess he was always right. Dang it. So he had it with his friends too. I mean, Jesus is traveling around with his disciples on what I like to think of as a 3-year, road trip. And you know what road trips are like. Like, our family loves road trips. And then you sort of have this exuberant phase. We're like, yeah, we got the snacks. We got the sound. We're ready to go. And then there's the phase of the road trip where you start to get a little tired. And then you get a little punchy. And then anything that anyone does annoys you. Jen Hatmaker tells the story of she's on a road trip with her family. She's mother of small children. And she said, I got to the point where I turned to them and I said, the next one of you that says the name Mom, I am going to throw myself out of this moving vehicle, and so help me, I'm taking one of you with me. So you get to these spots in road trips. Do we imagine that Jesus with his disciples, they didn't have internal conflict? They did. It's just part of life. I mean, you think of, at one point in Matthew 18, you get John, these guys saying, who's the greatest in the kingdom? Why are they asking Jesus this? Because they want to be the greatest in the kingdom, right? They're competing. You see this later in John 21. John is rubbing it into Peter 3 different times that he beat him in a foot race to the tomb. They're always competing, right? Another situation, Peter came up and he said, Lord, how often do I have to forgive my brother when he sins against me? Like, do you think he came and that was just a sterile theological question? Like, Lord, hypothetically, how often should one forgive one's brother, hypothetically? No, he's like, these guys are killing me. Like, how many times, right? And then there's another one. A couple chapters later, the mother of the sons of Zebedee comes and basically says, hey, say that my 2 boys can sit on your right and your left, when you come into your kingdom. And can you imagine what the other guys did when they heard that move, by their moms? Like, dude, your mom is killing us, right? Conflict, it happens, it's everywhere. Jesus is familiar with it. He also has conflict with the Pharisees. And he dishes a little. And let me quote our Lord and Savior. You hypocrites, you blind guides, you whitewashed tombs, you are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. And then he gets really low. You lawyers. So Jesus knew conflict. This is not strange to human existence together.
Yeah.
That's the point, Jamie.
That's the point. So lots of things, back to conflict, can go either really, really wrong. It's kind of a pivotal time when conflict surfaces, especially with tension. It can either go really wrong, or sometimes conflict can be the beginning of something different, right? So it's pivotal how we approach, how we see it. In our journey with family or professionally in our jobs or with each other, we treat conflict as really important. We really pay attention to conflict. In fact, the closer the relationship is, the more time we probably think about conflict with everybody, whether it's a significant friend, our sons, our greater family, one another, our working relationship. We think a lot. We're not flippant at all about conflict, and we want to encourage you with some things about that. We have had conflict, it turns out, about just about everything. And we'll give you some examples like where to go to dinner, right?
How to arrange the furniture in the house.
Yep. Paintings even, what walls they go on, conflict. Our relatives, our families.
Your relatives, your family.
Yeah.
House cleaning.
House cleaning, conflict. What to throw away when we have our stuff, what to throw away, what to keep. And I guess I should say what to throw away, what to keep. That's usually our tension. Throw away, keep.
Throw it away.
Throw it away, that's what it says.
Our schedule, time management, what we say yes to, what we say no to.
Yep.
Thought about it.
Finances, we've had conflict over that.
Yeah. Our tone.
Tone with each other.
It's important. Tone is important.
It's important. We have had conflict over the best way to drive across Santa Barbara. Is it this way, Mountain Freeway? We've had conflict over that.
Something that I had no idea you could fight about when I was a young and unmarried person. We fought about sex.
I
didn't know you could fight about that.
We've had conflict over sex. We've had to work on that. We've had conflict over our kids. Had to really work.
Your kids, yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
How to stack the dishes in the sink. Left side, keep the right side clear.
Or is it really that necessary? That's what we have that conflict, we got to stack. It's like, it's not really that necessary. So just to let you know, there's probably not a thing that you can imagine that we haven't had some conflict about. Some of it's silly, don't worry, we're not like constantly battling. Sometimes we're laughing at ourselves, right? But the more the tension kind of increases, the more that we've addressed it. So we treat it as something really important because of how frequent it happens. It happens frequently, and because it has the potential to come between us. Even the silly, stupid things like a toaster. Are we getting a 4-slice or a 2-slice? That was a big thing when we registered, and I remember thinking, what the heck, who cares? But it had the potential to kind of separate us a little bit. So we treat it so importantly. So we're going to go into a couple things. We actually have rules of engagement for how we do our conflict. So tell them that example that you,
So when I was doing my doctoral coursework, I had this one assignment where I had to go to a foreign environment and reflect theologically. And I'm thinking, I've worked with students for 20-something years. There's not a lot of foreign environments. And then I'm getting off the freeway at Las Positas, and I see the sign at Earl Warren Showground, Saturday night MMA fight. And I'm like, I am so going. So I called a couple of my friends, a couple of my pastor friends. I was like, let's go. We're going to go. And my buddy's like, yeah, my goal is to come home with someone else's tooth. Like, we thought it was just going to be chaos, chairs, flames, live tigers running by. It turns out you go to MMA fight, there are rules of engagement. Like, there's actually rules. They have thought about it, and these guys know it, and it wasn't total barbarism. Like, apparently a lot of these guys are some smart cats, and they go out to dinner afterwards, like, that was awesome when you put your elbow in my face. But they have rules of even how you fight in MMA. That was a shock to me.
So in that same step, we're really careful about our conflict. So we've actually set up some rules. So there's several of them. You might have some of your own. Not everybody's are the same, but here's a couple for us. First one we often throw out is no eye poking, tripping, punching, knee dropping. It's silly, and we joke about it. We haven't really had this issue, but it's actually an unspoken thing that we're not going to let our fighting become physical. And I am so, in a room this size, when I say that, I acknowledge that some of you maybe have had physical fighting or pushing and shoving things in your view, or been a part or been exposed to that. We have found it really helpful, like our other couple I'll share with you, to just say some of these things outside of the heat of the moment and context. We have so much more chance of having success once it gets heated. And believe me, especially in your significant long relationships, especially in marriage, it's surprising how much you can love someone and how mad you can get at each other. It's startling, and it's not just for people out there. The healthiest of relationships, there can be a lot of anger. This is someone who I love, and then we can kind of get sideways. So it's something that we put in place to just protect ourselves. We're going to say something.
If you don't have rules, you basically, when the conflict gets hard, and this goes at work, organizations, your marriages, your friendships, it's like pouring gas on. You don't even know why you're fighting anymore. You're fighting so poorly, you don't even know why you're fighting anymore. Yeah. And it just does damage. Yeah. So we've thought about these rules.
So that's our first one. We never get physical. Next one is no, always, never, or swearing at one another. These are all kind of the same thing. These are escalators, right? So literally, we do not use the word always and never. And if we do, it doesn't mean that we haven't messed up. There's like time out. You just said always. It's like, okay, wait, let me.
You always do that.
You always do that. You never did. You never, again, when it escalates, when you say that word, it just takes it up. And then we don't even remember exactly what we're arguing about, right? So we just say, we're not going to say always and never, and we can call each other out at any time. Swearing, not that we do that with each other, but again, when you're really mad and you're trying to hit that person just a little bit more tough, it's tempting to throw in something that stings and hurts more. But we say, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to escalate it, and we're not going to do that. If that ever comes up, nope, time out. We already said we weren't going to do that. Last one we'll share with you today, no leaving in anger, right? It's really tempting to just like, I'm out of here. I cannot handle this anymore. So unless we give each other permission, like, hey, I need to pause. Let's come back to this after dinner. We've done that. But we can't just cut out and split the scene, because that just leads to, again, just keeps compounding. So those are some ideas, rules of engagement that have helped us with conflict.
And there are others that we didn't share. Jesus said, don't let the sun go down on your anger. It's because Jesus knows how this works. We've had some late, 2 a.m. finishing of conversations because that's a rule that we put in place for ourselves, and it just helps. We've done a bunch of research on marriage stuff, and there's a guy named John Gottman, and he and his wife did an incredible amount of research on couples. So much so, they'd put them in these like condos with cameras everywhere. Creepy? Yes. And they would watch them and how they interacted. And they got it to where what you call, I guess in the sciences, a thin slice. They could tell within a matter of seconds with like a 90-something% accuracy rate whether or not the couple was going to make it. Is that wild? Like 90-something% accuracy on what were they looking for? One of the things they were looking for is how they repaired. When there was conflict, did they have the wherewithal to repair with one another? Mm-hmm. And it's really important, and so we are careful about how we repair. Given that conflict is a given, it happens, we're mindful and careful about, okay, we need to repair well, because we know that the couples that don't do very well. And so we've thought about even how we do apologies. Like there are fake apologies, okay? For instance, and I think that I have a list of like 34 of these. I'm just going to give you 3. The forced sorry. It looks something like this. I'm sorry, okay? Do you feel the love? Do you feel the movement toward reconciliation at that moment, right? It's sort of like the forced sorry. What you're really saying is, I can't imagine why you're so upset. It wasn't that bad, okay? That does nothing to move two people that are isolated from each other towards each other. Then you have the blanket sorry. You're going to recognize this one because we probably have all done it. Whatever I may have done, I am sorry.
In general.
Yes, give me a dispensation for the last 10 years, right? And basically you're saying, I don't care what I did, can we talk about something else? It's just sort of whatever you think that was. And then there's the superior sorry. I'm sorry. You guys recognize this? I think I've said this. I know I have. I'm sorry that you feel that way. What you're really saying is you have a problem. Emotional, mental, probably otherwise too, right? So pay attention to how you do repair. I hope you're writing this down or something, because we are giving you thousands of dollars of marital advice right now, okay? So a real apology. Here's just a couple of things you ought to pay attention to. It acknowledges the fact that I did something wrong. And sometimes that takes a little while. Like, I apologize for something, and Jamie will say, I'm not quite sure you're grasping what it is that is broken here. And so we got to flesh that out. Sometimes it's quite clear to me. I knew I blew it. I just own what you did and accept responsibility. And then, and I think this is a kingdom of God thing. This is where it gets different as a follower of Jesus. Then you ask for forgiveness. Asking for forgiveness is different than just saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry is part of it. An apology is part of it. You're acknowledging it, you're owning it. But the asking for forgiveness, this is where the repair really can happen. And it really is possible. It's hard work, but it is so possible, and it's so beautiful when it happens. We've thought about having language, kind of a script for ourselves, because sometimes in the heat of everything, you get away with a lame apology. And so we don't always do this, but we certainly have done it for a long time on the things that matter, where we will say, after the apology, I will say to Jamie, will you forgive me? And because most of the time it's me, but I will say, will you forgive me? And then we have this little litany that we do with one another, and there's some thought behind it. Her response would be, if we've done a good job to this point, and I've grasped what I've taken ownership for, she'll say, I forgive you. And that's this horizontal forgiveness. Do you know that the majority of Jesus' teaching on forgiveness is between us? It's horizontal. There's a few times in the New Testament that forgiveness is mentioned between us and God. Most of the time, Jesus is instructing us to be people who forgive each other. That's radical in this world. And so for her to tell me, I forgive you, that's this priestly thing we do towards one another. And then she takes that priestly role, the other person does, and reminds me, you are forgiven. Like whatever you have ever done has been forgiven. This is not outside of that. And sometimes when you've screwed up, you just need to hear the reminder that you're forgiven. You didn't go outside of the universe. This too was covered at the cross. And then, because Gottman's research said what separates people is contempt, we want to work intentionally against contempt. And so she'll say, I won't hold this against you. See, that's why you never have to worry about fighting with always and never, because there's no always and never. When we dealt with it, it was done. If you don't, you take it with you into the next fight, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden someone drops a fork at the table and there's a divorce. It's like, what happened? Contempt. Cut off contempt. I won't hold this against you. And finally, this won't come between us. You know, that picture of our wedding vow video, Jamie is saying her vows at that moment in the video. We've said nothing will come between us. We're doing this for life. And so I think you have to be intentional about your language so that nothing comes between you.
Yeah. So there's all sorts of research that says being able to repair and forgive instills these, listen to what happens when you weigh in and get through it. Confidence, security in relationships that can't be found otherwise. So there's no shortchanging this. You're actually earning and building strength and muscle as you work through it. It's in the testing, the passing through it, that we become more together. Closest friends, coworkers, long-time relationships, whenever you pass through that conflict, you're building something that won't be broken, won't be as weak as if you avoided it and left it. You know, the idea, the metaphor is like when you break a bone, right? And it repairs and it calcifies, and you won't break it in that same place again. And that's what happens when we really lean into and kind of go through conflict. And I recognize again in this room that there's a lot of families that we come out of that didn't make it through conflict, that didn't pass through it, that kind of stopped there, and then it's scattered and separated. And I'm so sorry about that. I want you to hear and see in us that it's possible to be hopeful about conflict, that it doesn't always go like that there's actually something God's building and using in our conflict. And again, there's nobody going without conflict. There's not one relationship so the point isn't to not have conflict, it's to use and grow and be changed by the conflict that you have. something more, something stronger. So we would say conflicts don't always or simply mean something's wrong, but we found that it's always an opportunity. Always an opportunity. So last couple things. We can't talk about this with saying two other things about just our relationship and long term. All the studies say that the basis for surviving the conflict in a marriage in particular is directly related to the friendship that we have. The friendship. So a lot of times we enter in and we have a strong, great friendship and then we take off, but we've seen a lot of our friends in long-term relationships kind of forget to keep cultivating that friendship. So he and I, we actually work hard and give ourselves a lot of time to keep building our current friendship. We're almost 30 years in to this relationship. We're still building our friendship because we know that as strong as our friendship is, we're going to be able to tackle our conflict better, which will be coming. We'll have conflict today, tomorrow, and the next day. So friendship, we can't say it enough that that's actually been kind of the foundation piece. And lastly, the second thing is our own love for Jesus. Our own love for Jesus individually is such a fortifier. It kind of gives us everything we need so that when the conflict comes about the toast or sex or money or different things, we actually have this commitment, this life-giving kind of thing happening in each one of us that we know we're going to be about grace and forgiveness when it's all said and done. So partnering together in friendships and in community and in marriages with people who love Jesus in that way, man, we have so much more opportunity to actually grow from it and have a full life within it.
Yeah. So that's the invitation that we have for you this morning is to not to come and be like us. We're barely doing it. So, but to consider conflict around you differently, to think about it maybe with Kingdom of God lens, and to start practicing even right now. I can think of how I did poorly in some conflict in the dorm, and yet how living together with brothers and sisters was a good lab, and I had to learn some things. If you can learn how to say hard things well, you will be ahead of 99% of the people you work and live with. Learn how to say hard things well, grace and truth. I feel like being a football coach was what helped me learn how to say hard things well. It's also really costly if you don't do this. There's a lot at stake. Toxicity and the companies that you'll be a part of, and working relationships and friendships and families and marriages if we don't learn how to do conflict like Jesus would have us do this. You know, he says, when the storms came in Matthew 7, that tells us storms are coming. Learn how to do this well. So it's the month of love. Our encouragement to you, become apprentices of Jesus. Learn from him. He has so much to say about being righteous with one another. Learn how to do it his way. Let the Holy Spirit help us navigate conflict, and it leads us to thriving. And James, he must have been an old man when he said this, but he said, you can actually greet these things when they come as friends because they produce something in us that easy road would not have produced. Yeah. So bless you, bless us to be a reconciling community that knows how to do that with one another.
If you'd like to stand and worship with us, we're going to sing.